Tons of Poppy Playtime news was just revealed, including some massive developmental updates from the devs, discussions about books releasing for the game, brand new secret unused characters, and even some ideas for a VR version of Poppy Playtime coming in Chapter 3. You need to watch this video. Like if you're excited for Chapter 3, and as a reward, here is my girlfriend, Apila Bird. So for starters, I was spending my day as usual stalking the Poppy Playtime Discord server, and the developers recently gave us a bunch of Chapter 3 development updates. Starting first off with one of the developers replaying Chapter 2 of the game, and then saying, I just played Chapter 2 for the first time in months to record footage for the behind the scenes video. Chapter 3 is going to be so much better, which is of course what you'd expect them to say, but he even goes deeper saying Chapter 3 is just going to look like next level good compared to Chapter 2. And also the audio integration and sound design is going to be like way better. Now this is all great stuff that I love to hear from the developers. It shows they are constantly making improvements on the game. However, this also sort of brings up a worry for me, since in other dev updates, they actually told us that they were even thinking about having to remaster Chapter 1 and 2 to match the new one's quality. And I wonder if maybe Chapter 3 literally is going to release and be so much better than Chapter 1 and 2 that they are just fully defunct as the company grows. And then maybe once Chapter 4 comes out, they have to remaster them all again, and so on. It's definitely a good problem to have that the game keeps getting better, but I'm really interested to see what they mean when they say Chapter 3 is so much better. In terms of gameplay, the devs also talked about that, saying as far as like actual game design goes, like mechanics and progression, I think you'll definitely notice an improvement, which is another thing I'm expecting to massively improve as the chapters go on, especially since maybe I'm alone on this, but after playing Project Playtime a lot, their newest release, and then going back to Chapter 1 or even Chapter 2, the grab pack and overall mechanics feel extremely clunky and a lot less intuitive to the player, so this should hopefully be a big quality of life improvement. Plus, in other dev updates, they said that there was going to be a ton of other mechanics revolving around the hands that they're going to be adding, so that's extremely exciting. In terms of horror elements for Chapter 3, which honestly seems to be the main focus of the chapter, the developers actually said, I'm really excited for the audio improvements. So much of being scary revolves around audio, and the improvement is really gonna make it feel more scary. Now, I don't know if you've really paid attention to the developers' music in the game, but it is definitely some of the best in all of indie horror. From Project Playtime to Chapter 2 and even Chapter 1 to some extent, the game's environmental music placement and skills are shockingly well done. So I assume, as they're saying, Chapter 3 is going to play on that well and actually make it scarier and darker too. In other Chapter 3 news, the devs went on further about the gameplay and overall environment, saying there's also just going to be more random areas to explore that aren't necessary to move the story forward. The game won't feel quite as linear that way and feel a bit more exploratory, which in other words means while it's not going to be open world, there's probably going to be more areas like the game station's playground area that don't have anything to do with the actual gameplay. However, they are fun places to explore and learn more about the factory. The devs even said that there was going to be some extra lore drops and story stuff hidden in these areas, so theorizing in Chapter 3 is going to go absolutely wild. I already know it. Also, the developers subtly hinted that there's going to be multiple new characters coming in Chapter 3 in a random chat on Discord, saying, we had an emergency meeting the other day with the creative team because we actually had to change some of the Chapter 3's character names due to potential copyright infringement, which while somewhat worrying, and I hope nothing actually happened to them, there's clearly going to be tons of new characters in Chapter 3 to the point where they literally had to have a meeting to discuss all of their copyright and make sure they weren't infringing on anybody else's rights. Plus, this also confirms to us that the names of the Chapter 3 characters are somewhere hidden out there, so go search every single company named to existence and we will find it. The last gameplay related Chapter 3 thing the developers told us was simply that there's also just really cool tech being utilized in Chapter 3 that is gonna blow people away. Most likely talking about the new hand mechanics and other cool stuff, including some things we will talk about later in this video. But in terms of Chapter 3's actual release, the devs are still supposedly planning out the game's rollout, and while we don't have any release dates or trailers yet for obvious reasons, the devs recently brought up the idea of actually bringing Chapter 3 and Poppy Playtime into VR, saying, I'm really interested in doing some sort of short VR experience for Chapter 3 as marketing before it comes out. I think it could be really cool and scary. So while it's just a random idea being thrown around, there's real actual talks and potential plans in the future to bring Poppy Playtime into VR. However, I should clarify, when they say this, they aren't talking about moving the full game into VR, although I'm sure that's something that they have thought about way later in the game's development, but rather they want to make some sort of short virtual reality experience that people can watch in anticipation for the third chapter. They elaborated on this point more, saying, I'm imagining something kind of like this maybe, but inside Playcare, linking a video of a VR experience revolved around the popular movie It, another horror experience used for promoting that movie. And to be honest, this looks absolutely horrifying if it actually comes true. Now, I don't know when they're planning on releasing releasing Chapter 3, but I have no idea how they're going to make a full-blown VR experience, presumably in just a couple months. But it could either be showing their ambition or possibly that Chapter 3 is a bit further away than what we may have been expecting. But in terms of theories, something I found interesting and just wanted to mention is that while people were talking about theories and lore hints inside of the server coming into the game, somebody randomly said as a joke, MatPat is watching, to which Micah responded, there's something I want to say so bad, but I'll never be able to. Which gives me a couple impressions. Either one, that MatPat solves something about the Poppy Playtime story or something big that Micah doesn't want to reveal yet, or perhaps more likely, maybe MatPat will make an appearance in-game in some way, very similar to what Jacksepticeye did a little while previously. I don't know, leave your comments down below if you think I'm just overthinking everything, and subscribe while you're at it. A couple other minor things worth mentioning is that somebody asked about Season 2 of Project Playtime, which has been delayed for a few months at this point, to which Micah would actually respond saying, Phase 2 is cooking, but I can't say any dates yet. So we aren't too close, but we know that's making at least some progress. And in fact, we even saw some emotes and YouTube shorts released by them that could also make it into this Phase 2 in reference. Also, something extremely interesting is that somebody asked the devs if there's any chances for a book on the game releasing at some point in the future, to which they would actually respond, I think that'd be cool someday. And more in depth, they say, especially an art of Poppy Playtime book would be cool. So at some point, we could actually expect there to be books on the game sometimes in the future, probably not until Poppy Playtime itself is actually fully done. And if anything, it'll probably be a deep look into the game's animation or art or what it took to make it, which would actually be pretty insane. Also, if you don't natively speak English, recently Chapter 1 specifically has gotten some SteamDB updates under the name translation. So they seem to finally be working on adding translations into the game, at least in captions as well. But most importantly, recently for Poppy Playtime Chapter 2's anniversary, yes, you heard it right, it's been a full year, the developers dropped an in-depth behind-the-scenes video showing off a tons of stuff that didn't make air. They revealed a bunch of different new characters that never made the cut, like Cassie Cutie Pillar, who actually looks really good now that we can see her up close, most of the time anyway, and tons of other cool stuff telling us why Daisy the Flower didn't make the cut, some unused animations for these characters, and even some different iterations like a blue Brawn that we could see in the back of the Rejected Toys room, plus some concepts for other characters who didn't make the cut like Lovebug and Sunny Buddy here as well. Also inside of this BTS video, we could see some scrapped versions of Chapter 2 showing that there were a ton of different parkour and gameplay mechanics that never made it into the second chapter, and it's a lot of really cool mechanics that makes me wonder if maybe they'll be implemented into Chapter 3 in some sort of better, higher quality way. Also, something interesting is, like I said, they showed off 13 different toys that never ended up making it into the game, and following this release, the developers actually said on Discord that if any of the 13 toys really take off like a lot, I could see them potentially being added into Chapter 4 or something. So while we could basically confirm that at least most of these characters aren't going to be coming into the future of the game, it seems like depending on how popular some of these characters get, they could end up getting cameos in the games in the distant future, which is something I feel like they could be taking into account for Chapter 3, but that's a story for another video. One final cool detail about this behind the scenes video is that they also said that since it's gotten a good reception, they're planning on doing one for Chapter 1 as well on its second anniversary, so we could get to see a bunch of other cool stuff that didn't make the cut, like when the factory used to be somebody's home. But while this BTS video on the surface is extremely innocent and doesn't seem to be that big of a deal, there are a ton of secrets hiding beneath about this teaser and other stuff that I'm working on a theory for in the next day or so, so make sure to subscribe to see that. I want to make sure it's perfect, and peace.